In 1992, the landscape of fighting games was forever changed when Mortal Kombat first appeared before the impressionable eyes of kids everywhere. Inspired by classic and contemporary martial arts and action films like Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, Bloodsport, and Big Trouble in Little China, what resulted was a high fantasy kung fu blend of intense action, powerful characters, and signature finishing moves called fatalities that were the signal points of controversy at the time. Being able to rip your opponent's spine out back in the early 90s was something that had parents raging at the sensationalized violence that every kid on the block was getting into. Just look at this commercial. That's how it felt. Mortal Kombat was known for being the more intense and edgy fighting game at the time compared to things like Street Fighter II. Both are masterpieces for the time period of fighting games, but the brutality of Mortal Kombat and the backlash around it from parents just added to the desire to want to play it and the addiction of figuring out what all of the fatalities were. You had iconic characters like Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero. As the franchise grew, so did the roster, but back in the beginning, this setup was all you needed. Fighting your way up the tower and facing off against Goro and then finally Shang Tsung in an ultimate fight to decide the fate of humanity. What a time to be alive. Mortal Kombat 2 was released only a year later, pushing the envelope even further and adding in more characters that would become signature to the franchise, people like Baraka, Jax, Kitana, Melina, and many more. It may seem strange to say nowadays, when we have a solid string of video game adaptations turned into live action that people are loving, many of them turning out to be very good, but back in the early 90s, this was an extremely rare thing. Back then, usually it was the other way around, where you had a lot of video games that were based on pre-existing movies. But going from video game to film, we had things like the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Where are we? I got a feeling we're not in Brooklyn no more.
Double Dragon, and Street Fighter with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Which, okay, I do appreciate the Street Fighter movie for its 90s cheesiness, but to say it's a good adaptation of the game is a huge stretch. The Street Fighter II anime film, though, that's a different story. Top notch. Check it out. Anyway, my point is, you would rarely expect a game to be made into live action, and if it did, the results were rather underwhelming. But somehow, just 3 years after the release of the first Mortal Kombat arcade game, and coinciding with the release of Mortal Kombat 3, the franchise would get its first taste of being on the big screen. Paul W.S. Anderson came on to direct, who at the time had only directed one film called Shopping, but they saw the potential in his style as well as his willingness to bring a Hong Kong-style action sensibility to American audiences, and they let him have at it. He's a director that's hit or miss for a lot of people. He went on to make Event Horizon, that many consider to be an underrated horror classic. He also did the first Alien vs. Predator movie, which is a fun ride of a film. But then he also did most of the Mila Jovovich Resident Evil movies that have very mixed reception. But he also married Mila Jovovich in real life, so overall, I'd say he's a success. Anyways, as I make this video, I want to try to emphasize that I am trying my best to be objective with all of these movies. But when it comes to the 1995 Mortal Kombat film, you have to understand that as a kid, this was one of my all-time favorite movies, and I watched it constantly. I have such a deep nostalgic love for this movie, and every time that I watch it, it's hard for me to pick up on its flaws because I'm just transported back into my childhood sensibilities and loving every single fight scene and every interaction with the characters. I even still have my VHS copy, the same exact one that I would watch all the time as a kid. And considering when this came out, how video game adaptations were created and perceived at the time, and looking at all of the Mortal Kombat live action stuff that came after it, I think it's genuinely amazing that this film is as good as it is. Look, it's no masterpiece of cinema, but as a Mortal Kombat movie and a 1995 action flick, it works pretty well. It does a great job explaining the premise simply and effectively, but it doesn't get bogged down in its own lore or makes it too complicated. It shows us each of the three main characters, Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, and gives us quick explanations of who they are and what their motivations are. Liu Kang wants revenge, Johnny wants to prove that he's not a fraud, and Sonya is looking for Kano. Robin Shou does a fantastic job as Liu Kang. He's believable, charismatic, and above all, he can actually fight. He has the majority of the fight scenes in the movie and even worked on the choreography, not just for his own scenes, but for everybody. Raiden is another standout character played by Christopher Lambert from the Highlander franchise. He has a lot of iconic monologues here as well as a handful of comedic moments. Lyndon Ashby does a wonderfully accurate portrayal of Johnny Cage's snarky personality, and he was my favorite when I was a kid. But I think ultimately the best actor in this movie, and I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, is Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa, the guy that plays Shang Tsung. His menacing stare, the way that he delivers his lines, and says the classic phrases from the games, I will never forget the way he says this.
Your soul is mine. Flawless victory. Save your pity for the weak. It has begun!
The other thing that stands out about this movie is the special effects. By today's standards, a lot of early 90s CGI looks pretty bad, but back then, this was pretty ambitious to attempt a fully CGI character like Reptile, or the effects of Scorpion. But they didn't rely just on CGI because there's plenty of practical effects here too, such as Goro. Goro looks amazing here. There was actually somebody inside of this suit alongside people operating animatronics, and they had to do choreographed fight scenes with this thing. And I love effects like this. This is when filmmakers were ambitious enough to do them for real instead of just relying on CGI. So much talent and complexity went into creating this creature, and if you appreciate nothing else from this movie, you have to appreciate the Goro effects. But of course, thinking critically about the movie, the tournament in the film doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. There's no structure to it, nothing is explained. You just cut from random fight to random fight. They're all in different locations. Some fights go to the death, others don't, and it really feels pretty random until it gets to the end. One fight that always felt weird to me was the first Liu Kang fight. By this point, you have the entire roster of at least Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 of the games, and he fights just a random character. It's a cool fight scene, but I always felt it was an odd way to start it out and that they should have just put a different Mortal Kombat character here. The Johnny Cage versus Scorpion fight is a highlight. It's metal as fuck, especially when he takes Cage to his realm, rips his face off, starts shooting fire out of his skull mouth. I mean, that's just the coolest thing ever. But the fights are also very uneven. Johnny Cage gets 2 major fights with Scorpion and Goro, but Sonya only gets 1 against Kano. And Liu Kang gets the most amount of fights. He fights the random dude from the beginning, Kitana, Sub-Zero, Reptile, and finally, Shang Tsung. But I will say that the Liu Kang versus Reptile fight is my favorite in the entire movie, and the music that plays in the background still hypes me up to this day. Actually, all of the music in the movie is great and probably contributed to me being a metal and rock fan. And how can you forget that motherfucking theme song? You hear that, and no matter how weak or untrained you are, I swear it makes you want to fight everybody in your path right then and there. And once again, for the time period it came out, this was a pretty good adaptation. It told the actual story of the game, did the characters justice, and they used their signature attacks. It treats itself seriously and not just like some tongue-in-cheek joke every 2 seconds. And besides being a little incoherent and having dated special effects, the movie still holds up. I guess the biggest complaint, though, at the time and now is that it was rated PG-13, and since the games were infamous for the gore and fatalities, it did fail in that aspect, but I can see from a studio perspective, especially at the time, that they wanted to try to get the largest audience possible, and most of the Mortal Kombat audience at that time was younger, so PG-13 allowed more people to see it that would be interested. It's something that nowadays I'd be more critical of, since video game properties have proven themselves over time, but for 1995, I'm fine with the PG-13 rating. But unfortunately, the first 1995 feature film is the only live-action Mortal Kombat that I genuinely like. Now, let's talk about the rest of it. 2 years later, in 1997, the Mortal Kombat movie would release a direct sequel called Mortal Kombat Annihilation. And what an annihilation it was. I guess I will give them props for actually picking up right where the first one left off. After the defeat of Shang Tsung, the Emperor of Outworld, Shao Kahn, arrives to take this world for himself, and Annihilation double downs on that. But not even 5 minutes into the movie, you can tell something went wrong. Things look weird, like really weird, like really, really badly weird. The effects take a massive step down, the new villains look like rejected Power Ranger antagonists, and the acting is horrible.
You're alive. Too bad you will die.
As long as the portal remains open, your world becomes my world.
This is not good.
To the point where I honestly cannot believe this played in movie theaters, and everybody in the main cast of the first movie besides Liu Kang and Kitana has been replaced with different actors. You get the worst looking Shao Kahn of all time, and after he seemed so powerful and imposing at the end of the first movie, he just seems like an absolute dork here. And they unceremoniously kill off Johnny Cage in the first few minutes. What the hell happened? I remember watching this as a kid, and this moment immediately made me not want to watch the rest of the movie because Johnny Cage was my favorite character from the first. And considering this movie and the fact that Johnny Cage was completely left out of the 2021 movie, it's so strange to me that one of the best Mortal Kombat characters has been done so dirty in live action. But what really went wrong? Well, first of all, they lost Paul Anderson as the director, who at the time had said that he did all that he wanted to with the first movie, and he was moving on to make Event Horizon. So they promoted the cinematographer from the first film, John Leonetti, in order to direct this one. And although it does have a similar look and feel to the first, the quality is a massive step down. I think part of that too is that they just tried to throw so much at the audience in a relentless non-stop assault of visual effects and fight scenes. The first movie had plenty, but this one barely has any scene that doesn't involve some kind of wild over-the-top example of horrendous 90s CGI. And even for the time, this CGI was bad. Listen, by 1997, we had movies like The Lost World Jurassic Park, Men in Black, Independence Day. Like, by comparison, even to the first movie, this was a massive step down in terms of CGI. They also seemed desperate to throw as many characters from the games as possible into the film without any rhyme or reason. For example, we get Scorpion and Sub-Zero back just so they can have a brief fight scene, and then they're never mentioned again. Okay, technically it's Sub-Zero's brother, but you know what I mean. Baraka is here just as a throwaway minor obstacle for Liu Kang and barely mentioned. You have Jade, Melina, Cyrax, Smoke, Shinnok, Motaro, Ermac, Rain, Nightwolf, and on and on and on, and most of them barely do anything. I guess the one positive of the movie is Jax. He's only featured in the opening of the first movie, but here they make him into a main character and give him his signature arms. So since he actually has a decent amount of screen time, that was cool to see. But the recastings here, Christopher Lambert as Raiden in the first movie was great, but in this one they give Raiden this makeover, turning him mortal and making him brothers with Shao Kahn for some reason. Shao Kahn is actually played by Brian Thompson, who always plays villains in media. He was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but here he's just not on his A game, and I hate how he only wears the signature Shao Kahn skull helmet in the opening scene, but the rest of the movie, they just make him look like a normal dude. But like I said, this movie is just crammed packed with effects and fights, and they even try to incorporate animalities in this movie. It's a specific fatality in the games where the character will transform into what represents their spirit animal or whatever to kill their opponent. It's already a silly idea, but in a video game it works. But here, well, here it is in the movie. I'll say this though, this movie can be enjoyable if you watch it in the right state of mind. And I don't just mean while smoking some dope. I mean, I get the same kind of enjoyment out of this movie as I do watching Batman and Robin. It's just so absurd and stupid that you can sit back and laugh at it and have a good time if you want to, especially if you get a group of friends all together. It's not good, not at all, but it's certainly entertaining, and you will not be bored watching it, and that's more than I can say for some of the upcoming iterations. It's no surprise that Annihilation performed badly, and so a third movie in this continuity never happened. But the next year, in 1998, they attempted to take the franchise to television instead, with Mortal Kombat Conquest, a live-action series that lasted for one season, and this is back when TV seasons gave you a good amount of episodes. You have 22 episodes in total of this show that is apparently meant to take place in the same continuity as the first two movies, except this is 500 years earlier. At first, I thought they were just using stock footage of the movies and the sets because they had it available, but I guess it really does connect. So the Raiden in this show and the Shang Tsung in this show are the younger versions of themselves from the movie. Again, I'm sorry for mispronouncing names, but the show stars Paulo Montalban as Kung Lao as he assembles a team and is mentored by Raiden. And he battles various enemies of Outworld, with Shang Tsung being basically the main villain, but also Shao Kahn. And this is very much a product of its time. It's very much in line with something like Xena Warrior Princess or Hercules, just not as good. I watched a handful of episodes, and it's cool to see Kung Lao as the main character since he's usually my favorite character to play as in the games. The other two main characters are Zero and Taja. Who the fuck are they? Exactly. These are two original characters for the show. Yeah, so actually the 2021 movie is not the first to pull the whole let's make an original character for a Mortal Kombat adaptation thing. I just wonder why in a franchise that at this point had 4 games to pick from that are filled with characters, why they felt the need to make original characters for the show. Like, the reason people tune in is to see the characters they know adapted into live action. There's so much to choose from, but nope, just let's throw in 2 90s generic fantasy characters. But you do get other characters from the games. You get Scorpion here, played by the same actor that played him in the movies, and this is his introduction.
Takeda is no more. I am Scorpion.
Sub-Zero is here too, though it's technically yet again a different Sub-Zero. But I honestly don't think you could make a Mortal Kombat adaptation of any kind without Scorpion and Sub-Zero, at least somewhere in it, or else every single fan with Riot, myself included. Quan Chi shows up for a bit, and I actually think he looks kind of cool. I like his black armor, and the makeup looks pretty good. You can tell they were trying here. Even though not every fight scene is spectacular, for a 90s TV series, they were able to pull off some pretty decent choreography. And it always makes a world of difference when your actors can actually perform it themselves, and you don't need to constantly cut to awkward-looking stunt doubles. Obviously, the fights aren't as intense as the games, and it's toned down for television, but it's still mostly well done. Shao Kahn is a constant looming presence, always plotting to take Kung Lao's soul and sitting on his giant throne, and thankfully, he keeps the skull helmet on. Also, apparently Shao Kahn and Raiden are played by the same actor, Jeffrey Meek. I had no idea. I wasn't sure what people thought of this show because, honestly, I've never heard anybody talk about it. But apparently it has a pretty high number of fans, and lots of people think it's the best live-action Mortal Kombat thus far. As far as online sources go, it was canceled after 1 season, more so due to going over budget rather than being poorly received. The show was just too costly to keep going, and the production studio didn't want to pay for it. I wish I had seen this show as a kid when it came out, because I feel like I would have really loved it back then, but I never even knew about it. If you are curious, the whole series is currently streaming on Max right now, so yeah, go ahead and check it out for yourself. After that, it would be a while before Mortal Kombat would return to live action, but I feel like we need to talk about Mortal Kombat Legacy from 2011, but I guess really we have to start with Mortal Kombat Rebirth. In 2010, Kevin Tanchirian released a short film online that was essentially his pitch to a studio to make a Mortal Kombat movie. So it's technically not official, but it does star Michael J. White, also known as Spawn, and of course also known as Black Dynamite. Here he plays Jax, and honestly, this is some brilliant casting. He's got the right build, and he is a legitimate martial artist. He sits in an interrogation room talking to Scorpion in order to recruit him to find Shang Tsung. Meanwhile, giving info on other characters like Reptile and Baraka, but here in this version, they changed the lore completely so that they're all more grounded, realistic interpretations of the characters, and it was an attempt to showcase the brutality of Mortal Kombat in live action, which hadn't really been done up until this point. I guess they thought the fantasy elements would be too silly, I'm not sure. Within 8 minutes, Johnny Cage gets beheaded, Reptile throws severed heads into his fridge, and we see a previous Scorpion kill. As a fan film and an Elseworld sort of thing, I think it works well. I wouldn't particularly want to see a whole Mortal Kombat movie like this where we have to change every character's backstory to make them human and realistic, because Mortal Kombat is filled with fantasy elements, but as a treatment just for the tone and intensity of a film, I think it works fine. But ultimately, what we got out of it was not a movie, but an online web series called Mortal Kombat Legacy, which, despite using some of the actors from the Rebirth short, seems to be a different continuity completely, especially since Johnny Cage is still alive with his head on his shoulders. This lasted technically 2 seasons, but as a web series, every episode is only around 10 minutes long, and each episode deals with different characters and only has rare moments where there's connections between them. In other words, the episodes are focused on character stuff, usually origins and backstories, and it doesn't have much in the way of an overall plot, especially for Season 1. Season 2 attempts to connect the dots a little bit more, but with a large cast and only 10 minutes per episode, you don't really get a whole lot here, and we never get to see the actual Mortal Kombat tournament, mainly just things that lead up to it. Michael J. White is back as Jax, and he's great, but he's only in 2 episodes, and you never get to see him with the metal arms, so it kind of just feels like a bummer. And with the short episodic format dealing with many different characters, each short is very hit or miss. For example, I like the episode that introduced Johnny Cage, with him trying desperately to get a new action TV show off the ground and failing, but there's another episode where Raiden loses his powers and ends up in a mental institution where nobody believes him. Oh my god, I hated this one. They also massively retool things like having Liu Kang's vengeance quest turn him into working for Shang Tsung instead of wanting to fight against him. But this time Liu Kang is just like a normal dude and it was his girlfriend that gets killed. I don't know. Look, if you never explicitly told me that this was Liu Kang, I never would have known. Shao Kahn also sucks, also not wearing the mask, and between the Rebirth Baraka and this Baraka, just neither. I guess the major pro is that Kari Hiroyuka Tagawa is once again playing Shang Tsung. Of course, this is an entirely different continuity, so it's not literally the same Shang Tsung from the 95 film, but it's still great to see him here. And his monologue to Liu Kang in one of the final episodes is legitimately great and probably my favorite of the entire series. Seeing him on the posters and promotions got me all kinds of excited to watch it, but similar to Michael J. White in Season 1, he barely shows up and is not utilized to his full potential. I get as a web series they were limited in what they were able to do, and some of the stuff they accomplish is cool, but ultimately there's just not enough to write home about, and overall, it was actually kinda boring. If you just want quick, isolated character origins, of which not many are accurate to the games, but whatever, these are interesting to check out. But if you want a storyline and an actual Mortal Kombat tournament, it's not here, and you're probably going to be disappointed. But then finally, in 2021, we got a brand new Mortal Kombat adaptation for the big screen. This one promised to give us our first steps into a brand new franchise and continuity. It was going to be R-rated, it was going to give us fatalities, and it was supposed to be the definitive Mortal Kombat live-action experience. And well, it wasn't. This one is directed by Simon McQuid and starts off with a genuinely good backstory and fight scene between Scorpion and Sub-Zero. It's intense, it's fun, it's a good spectacle, and it gets you ready for something special. But then it cuts to Cole. And who is Cole? Yeah, no one knows. but he's the main character of this movie and takes up the majority of the screen time. Yes, for some reason, instead of just letting the established ensemble of the game's characters be enough, they decided to add in an original character for the lead role. Here he has a dragon birthmark that is the marker for those chosen to fight in Mortal Kombat, but he doesn't know it. So it's the typical, hey, you're special, you're the chosen one kind of vibe that we've seen a million times. He's recruited by Jax and Sonya, and eventually they meet up with other characters like Liu Kang and Kung Lao, but they're all just a supporting cast here to the overall Cole story. This movie was a massive disappointment to me when I saw it in theaters, and after rewatching it to make this video, I slightly warmed up to it, but I still don't really like it. Here's what I do like. The opening fight scene is pretty good, and the rematch between Scorpion and Sub-Zero at the end, also not bad. Also, since Kung Lao is my main character to play as in the games, I do have to say he was done great here. You don't get a lot of him, but he's badass when he is on screen, and he does the hack kill fatality, which is glorious. But then he's killed off. God damn it. And the other thing this movie has that I like is Kano.
Kano wins.
Yeah, I would have never expected this in a million years, but I honestly think Josh Lawson as Kano is the most entertaining part of the entire movie. I would go so far as to say he's pretty much the perfect embodiment of Kano and almost single-handedly saves this movie for me. The mannerisms, his griminess, the humor, the hot temper, it's all fantastic. But then he's killed off. God damn it! And sadly, that's about it. Ludi Lin as Liu Kang looks amazing as the part, and he's great, but he's so backseated to Cole that he's just a supporting character. There's a whole thing about the markers giving them their powers, and Cole gets this body armor thing that looks terrible, and he fights Goro, who this time is of course modern with CGI, and sure, you can probably make an all CGI Goro look great, but this is not it. This movie came out 26 years after the first Mortal Kombat Goro was on screen, and the 95 version looks astronomically better. The fight scenes are also wildly inconsistent, and what I mean is the Scorpion and Sub-Zero fights feel like they were actually choreographed by somebody different than the rest of the movie. The other fights, minus the special moves and fatalities, I mean the actual fighting parts of the movie, the fights are done with this generic Hollywood quick-cut editing style where you don't even get to see them fight longer than 3 seconds before it cuts to a different angle or different shot, or even editing multiple fight sequences happening at the same time to further hide the choreography. For a series that is so deep in martial arts and various fighting styles, I want to be able to see the characters fighting. The movie is called Mortal Kombat, but we can hardly make out any of the combat. And speaking of which, the movie is called Mortal Kombat, but guess what never happens in the movie? Mortal Kombat. This is all before the tournament, and again, I don't understand. The format of a fighting tournament should be the simplest way to structure a movie. Earthrealm versus Outworld. Have different matches. Hell, even just do a bracket system. But somehow, none of the live-action Mortal Kombat material have figured out how to just do a tournament. You already have all the characters fighting. You didn't need to come up with another reason for it to happen. Just have Mortal Kombat in the Mortal Kombat movie. It seems so self-explanatory, but they've never really done it. Look, I wanted this movie to be great, and I was really hoping for it to be, but it just has so many little things that irk me that ultimately end up adding up too much for me to have an overall good experience. Overall, it's okay. There's some stuff in it I like, but really, it's a massive disappointment. Oh, and there's no Johnny Cage in the movie. We got plenty of Cole Young and his family because we know fans were dying to see him, but no Johnny Cage. Not until part 2. And that's where we're at now. A sequel to this movie, currently just titled Mortal Kombat 2, is set to release later this year in October of 2025, with much of its marketing so far focused on, well, Johnny Cage, being played by Carl Urban, who is better known as Billy Butcher from the TV series The Boys. This is going to have the same director as the first, and however much you want to read into it, they have mentioned that they heard the complaints of the first film and are trying to make this one better. Also, this one is supposed to actually feature the tournament, so good news. I am totally open to it, and I want this movie to be great, just like I wanted the 2021 movie to be great. I didn't make this video so that I could shit on all these adaptations, but I just wanted to go through them all and talk about the pros and cons, and also the strange coincidence of how often they miss the mark with Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat is personally my favorite fighting game franchise of all time, and something that's been part of my life since childhood. I have so many fond memories of playing the original games with my dad, and I still play the new ones to this day despite their flaws. I love the characters, and I honestly think this is something that could work in live action. It's just had a really hard time so far. If we look at those classic martial arts films that the original game was inspired by, Enter the Dragon is a martial arts tournament movie. Big Trouble in Little China, though it's a comedy, captures the mystic and fantasy aspects that are present in Mortal Kombat. Take a look at old school kung fu films and Hong Kong cinema. Look at how well choreographed they are. Look how they focus on the fight scenes and make it the true spectacle of the movie. If you just take that style and you add the Mortal Kombat aesthetic over it, you have your movie right there. Do long takes, do real people taking real hits and real stunt work at hand. There's something special that could be done here. But whatever that special ingredient is to take it from game to screen, nobody has fully captured it yet. If I was to rank all of the live action attempts so far, well, I think Legacy is last. There's just not enough to it, it's kind of boring, and some of the choices and interpretations of the characters are confusing and not what I want for Mortal Kombat. You can also throw Rebirth in with this as well. I kind of lump them together. After that, I'd put Mortal Kombat Annihilation. This movie is absolutely terrible, but with the right state of mind, it can be a so bad it's good experience. Then surprisingly, I'll put the Mortal Kombat Conquest TV show. It's pretty generic and definitely a product of the 90s, but the fight scenes are pretty good, and a lot of the characters that make appearances are fun to see, with Kung Lao as the main character and Shao Kahn keeping the skull helmet on. That all helps too. Above that, I would put the 2021 movie. It's a major disappointment, but with some highlights, and I can't get enough of this version of Kano. But still at number one for me would be the 1995 movie. Call it nostalgia bias all you want, but even without that, I feel like it's the only one that actually does Mortal Kombat. It's a bit incoherent, and of course it has that 90s cheese, but in terms of story, following the games, a good cast of actors to play the characters, and the fight scenes, it's still top of the line as far as live action Mortal Kombat goes, in my opinion. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think. What was your favorite live action attempt of Mortal Kombat? And do you think this franchise can actually work in live action? Do you think we just haven't found the right director or the right style yet? I think there's potential here, but after all of these attempts, we might be dead in the water. Let me know what you guys think down below. Thanks for watching this video, guys. As always, I really do appreciate it. Give the video a thumbs up and a comment to help it out in the algorithm. Also, if you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I do have Patreon channel memberships linked down below. I could use the help right now. I'd appreciate it. And there's also all the social media links where you can follow me. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you next time.
Flawless.